Hi friends, Mickey Mankeys here and welcome to Out the Back Door. Today I'm going to be canning up the end of our tomatoes. Join me. We had a few nights that were freezing and I didn't want to go and cover all the gardens anymore, so it was like, we're going to pick everything. And this is what I've got so far that were ripened. I do still have green tomatoes that I'm going to be working with later, but this is what I'm going to be processing today. I am using the Health Kick tomatoes and I'm going to be doing these in a diced. So I'm going to be putting these in pint jars, cutting them up so I've got diced tomatoes. I'm also going to be doing the Moby grape tomatoes, except I'm going to be putting a little bit of seasoning in these. So let's get to it. I'm just going to slice off the stem end of the tomatoes, and if I do notice any spots on there or whatever, I'll clean those off also. But I am just going to be roughly dicing these approximately like this, and I'm going to be tossing them into a bowl. Now, one thing about these tomatoes, they're not heirloom. And normally I do purchase heirloom tomato plants or tomato seeds because I don't want to have to add any extra acid to regulate the pH balance in it. You want to make sure that your pH is 4.5 or lower, and so I'm going to be adding citric acid to them in order to lower the pH so that we can hot water bath can these. Now, I have washed all of these already. I went and put them into the sink, rinsed them really well. I have my pint jars in the oven right now. I've got the oven set at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. I will have those in the oven for at least 20 minutes in order to sterilize. The nice thing about the grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes, if you use them, you don't have to cut them if you don't want. I'm going to be putting those whole into my jars. Another thing that I'm going to be doing, where you may differ if you're canning tomatoes, I leave my skins on. As you can see, I'm cutting them the way they are right now, and I'm going to get ready to can them that way. To me, taking the peel off is a waste. You have nutrients in the peel, and I don't know why so many people think they have to peel their tomatoes in order to can them. I've got the flame underneath my hot water bath canner right now, and I'll be raising the temp up on that shortly. I do want to bring it to just about a boil. Being I've got my jars in the oven, heating up and sterilizing, and I'm going to be pouring boiling water over my tomatoes once I get them jarred up. So everything's going to be good and hot when I go and I set the jars into the canner. Alright, I'm going to continue cutting these up, and once I get ready to start jarring it, I'll get right back to you. I finally have the tomatoes all chopped up, diced. The timer's gone off in the oven, so my jars are ready to come out, but I'm going to get my Tatler lids into the water and get them scalding while I start filling up jars. I also have a Dutch oven full of water that I need to heat up to boiling because that's what I'm going to be pouring over the tomatoes once I get them in there. And I didn't realize how many tomatoes I actually had to dice up. I'm going to work on those first before I even attempt to do the grape tomatoes, because I want to make sure that I have plenty of room in the canner. I can, I believe, get 14 or 15 of the wide mouth pints in my canner. Alright, I am going to be packing my jars with the tomatoes, and I'm leaving a 1/2 inch head space. You want to kind of pack them in there fairly tight, because otherwise they're really going to be floating around. I can always go back and add a few more if I need to. I took my vegetable tamper out, and I'm just going to gently smush down my tomatoes a little in order to pack them. Even though that I'm using a meatier tomato, they are going to make some of their own juice in here at the same time that I'm putting in the boiling water. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to add my salt next, and then before I add any more of the tomatoes, and then I'm going to add my water. And for the pints, I want to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now if you're doing quart jars, you're going to put 1 teaspoon. This way, instead of putting it in the bottom of the jar, I know that I've got it in here. And also being I did not use an heirloom type of tomato, I'm going to have to add more acid to it, being that we're hot water bath canning. And so I'm going to be adding citric acid. You can use lemon juice if you want, but I find this is just easier for me. So I'm going to be adding 1/8 teaspoon of citric acid to each one of my pint jars. This will help lower the pH level. You want it 4.5 or lower if you do decide you want to test it with a pH strip. Tomatoes have evolved. There's been so many modified versions of tomatoes, and it's gotten to the point where we've taken out so much of the good stuff of them in order to make healthier and more disease resistant tomato plants and everything, that we've more or less destroyed what we originally had that were healthy, and there was no problem, just water bath canning them. And now that I've got my salt in there and my citric acid, I am going to add a little bit more of the tomato into it to fill them up, and then I am going to start adding the boiling water. Remember I said 1/2 inch for a headspace, and that's going to include our water. And I've got to be able to get that little chopstick down in there to debubble also. Alright, my jars are packed. I am going to be adding my water. Okay, now I want to debubble my jars, because I know a lot of the water wasn't able to get all the way down in there. And I will be adding a little bit more. I'll top off the jars as needed. Okay, I've got a wet paper towel here. I'm going to make sure that my rims are wiped down well. And my Tattler lids have been scalding now, so I'm going to be ready to put those on as soon as I get done wiping the rims here. Alright, I've got my bands on. I'm going to get these into the canner. Alright, I got the first 12 jars into the canner. I'm going to pull a couple more jars out because that's all I've got room left for, is 2 more jars in there. And I will get that ready to go. And then I am going to bring it up to a boil. Once I come to a boil, I'm going to process my pints for 40 minutes. If I was doing quarts, I do 45 minutes. Now you can adjust to your altitude. And then once those are finished and I pull them out, I'll get on to the grape tomatoes. I just got done pulling out the first batch of the diced tomatoes that were in the canner, and I will show you a picture of them. There's a lot of liquid at the bottom and they have raised up, and the reason for that is because I raw pack them. I don't like to cook down my foods and heat them up and everything and then hot pack. I just like raw packing. So that is one of the main reasons that did that. So while it was cooking in the canning jar, while it was processing, more liquid came out of the tomatoes, and it did add more liquid into the bottom. That really doesn't matter to me. I'll shake up the jar a little bit more. And also when it cools, it's going to settle down a little bit, because my green beans do this all the time. So anyway, I did have enough of the diced tomatoes to do 2 more jars, and I've got those in the canner already, but I want to get going on these. Now I'm going to spice them up a little bit. I love garlic. I'm going to put a couple of cloves of garlic into each one of my jars to start with. I do feel that, those were little, I do feel that I can fill all of these nicely because I'm going to have leftover tomatoes yet, and I'll be doing other things with it. I'm not going to dig out any more jars or anything right now to finish those up. So anyway, alright, so I've got the garlic in there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm adding my salt, which is going to be 1/2 teaspoon to each jar. And this is going to be more of an Italian style canned tomato because of the seasoning I'm going to be putting in. All right, we still need to add some type of an acid, so I'm adding the citric acid because these are also not heirloom. So I'm putting 1/8 teaspoon of citric acid into each one of my jars. These are into the pint jars. If you were doing quarts, you would double all of this if you're doing quarts. Now the next part that I'm going to be adding in is Italian seasoning. Now this is my own blend here, but you can get any Italian seasoning from the grocery store or whatever, or make your own. And that smells so good. I'm going to be adding 1/4 teaspoon of the Italian seasoning mix into each one of my pint jars. I don't want to overpower it too much. Just remember, dried herbs, you don't have to use as much as you would fresh herbs. I am just going to load my tomatoes in. Now, 1/2 inch headspace again. And these are going to take more water than when we did the diced tomatoes. When I did my video on doing pickled red beets, I showed you a method that I used to like compact to get the food to settle down to the bottom a little bit more. I spanked the bottom. Well, I'm going to be doing the same thing with these because that may give me the opportunity to get 1 or 2 more tomatoes in there. Now I'm going to have extra, like I said, and what I'm going to do with these, I will be, I'll dehydrate some, but then I will cut them in half in order to dehydrate them, and I'm going to save some for salad. I need to make some new aprons. So all I did was I kind of covered, cupped my hand above here, and just give it a spank on the bottom, and they settle down more. Now when I pour my water in here, and then once I can them, they're probably going to float up to the top, just like the diced ones. Now, these you can use in any place that you would be using, say, like stewed tomatoes or tomatoes that do have Italian seasoning in them when you buy them from the store. Whether you're making some type of marinara sauce, spaghetti sauce, and anything like that. All right, that looks pretty good. So I've got my salt in here, citric acid, and my Italian seasoning, and now I'm going to add my water. And chances are your tomatoes are going to crack when you're cooking them, which is normal. Okay, so when I start using my chopstick to debubble, I'm going to have to be a little more careful so I'm not poking and splitting open my tomatoes. If you've never tried fermented tomatoes, using cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, that's really good. But I'm just going to wiggle this around, make sure I get all the air bubbles out, and I will adjust the level of the liquid if necessary. It smells so good already because of that Italian seasoning in here. Okay, there's a couple of jars that I still need to top off a little. Okay, remember to wipe down your rims. I know you're thinking, well, all I did was put water in. Wipe them down anyway. You never know if a little piece of herb or salt or something had gotten on there. Now my water is still really hot from when I took out the diced tomatoes already, but I turned the heat off. And once I get these in, then I will turn my heat back up, crank her back up. All right, we're going to process these the same amount of time that we did the diced tomatoes. So for the pints, I'm going to be doing 40 minutes. And for quarts, if you're going to do that, you would do 45 minutes. I think the whole tomatoes in here are so pretty. Okay, I can see that I'm also going to be adding more water into my canner because the water level is just barely coming above my lids. I still got hot water from when I was filling my jars. I can dump that in there, and I can take my remainder of my lids out of here and dump that in there also to help bring it up some. So I've got really hot water right away. I'm going to put the cover on there, turn it back on, and I am going to wait for it to get up to boil, and then I am going to start timing another 40 minutes, and then I'll take them out. As you can see, the grape tomatoes are floating at the top again, and I've got a lot of liquid on the bottom. And that was expected, being I had raw packed them in. But once they cool, they will start dropping back down to the bottom. I really don't like disturbing the jars while they're hot, but I just wanted to show you how the tomatoes are dropping down towards the bottom now that they're cooling off. And that's what will happen to the rest of them, and also with the whole tomatoes that I had just taken out of the canner. So this is how I do my diced tomatoes and my whole herbed tomatoes, my grape tomatoes. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you did enjoy this, please consider subscribing, give me a thumbs up and share, and if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. So until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless! I'm going to take you through the garden really quick just so you can see what's going on here. Yes, it looks like my tomato plants are dead. Yes, they are. These are determinate tomato plants, so they only got so large, and once they reach their peak and they've supplied all their fruit, the tomatoes, the plant actually dies off. Mr. Mankus thought it had blight at first, but this is what happens when you have a determinate tomato plant. Okay, now I need to really get going on the Moby grape. I've got a lot of tomatoes in there that I can pick yet. And being that we've got some really cold mornings coming up, I need to get picking. Well, looky here. Those are called bite marks from a deer.